Okay, and I shall start the meeting and
Thanks, Graham.
hand you over to Joe, who's our guest speaker tonight, who spoke to us about the Lilac project, but he's going to speak to us about digital design tools tonight. So over to you, Joe.
Here's Graham. And I'm going to try and speak to you a little bit less than I did last time. The Lilac session was quite, I think it was probably about 70 minutes of me talking non-stop. I barely stopped to take a breath. So I'm going to try and make it a little bit more interactive this evening. And the topic that we're going to explore together is digital design tools, which I feel it's a very interesting area. I feel like it's one that gradually is becoming more and more obsolete in a sense, because more and more of the tools that we use just, normally are digital ones anyway. However, in permaculture, there is often there's quite a strong emphasis on using appropriate technology or using the simplest possible technology, so that come the apocalypse, if modern technology isn't available, we can still fall back to first principles. However, that doesn't mean that we have to use them all the time, and often we can get a lot of efficiencies through using digital tools, I think. So anyway, I'm going to just kind of ask the question. So jump in and shout out if you've got an answer. What digital tools do you use when you're designing anything?
Illustrator by Adobe. Sorry.
Yep, Illustrator.
Yeah.
I use my hand because it's got each hand has 4 digits on it and a thumb, and I use that for measuring.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Alan. So let's define digital by electronic.
Sorry. Sorry. I was making a joke and got in the way there.
Well, but you did say digital, Joe.
Yeah, I did. But let's redefine it as electronic technology and computers. So what tools do people use for any kind of design that they currently do?
Hi, this is Thomas. I use a program called Garden Planner. It's a web tool which is more to do with traditional allotment style gardening, but it's great for measuring out your blocks of carrots with all the spacing, and it's got pretty pictures of all the vegetables you're growing. It's really useful.
Oh, cool. So does that already have suggested spacings for those kind of plants? Like,
yeah, it's all customizable, but it has different varieties you can plug in, and it will tell you roughly how many you can fit in each block. Like I say, it's not a very permaculture friendly tool, but for traditional allotment planning, it's quite cool.
Okay, cool. And that's called Garden Planner.
Garden Planner, yeah. It's by the guy who runs growveg.com or .co.uk or something.
Cool, thanks. And any others that people use?
Procreate.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Procreate.
Procreate.
Yeah, it's the like iPad drawing tool. So it's not precise, but it's useful for digital drawing.
Okay. What kind of things do you use that for? Obviously digital drawing, but
well, I say I use it. I'm hoping to use it because I've just bought myself a secondhand iPad, which I'm waiting to arrive. But I've like had to go on friends' ones and stuff, and it's just really great for kind of art creation, digital art creation. But hoping to use it to be able to create designs with layers that can be switched on and off, but that's more like freehand drawing rather than something like Photoshop or Illustrator, where it like just requires that much more technical knowledge to use it.
got you. So, and because it's got different layers, you can use that like overlays. So you could, if you're developing a permaculture design, you could have one which is your base map, and then the next one which might be your sector analysis. I don't know if you've covered this stuff on the course yet or not. And then you could have your zones and yeah, various different degrees of detail as you go on onto each overlay, for example, but all hand drawn. Any others? Any other tools people either have used or?
There's Inkscape, I think,
Yep.
and GIMP.
Yep. Do you want to tell us what they are?
That's for mind maps, but I've been using Xmind a bit.
Yep. Xmind. Who was it that was talking about Inkscape and GIMP?
It was me, Tiffany, sorry. Yeah, so Inkscape is a vector based program. So that's like Illustrator. But I think it's free of rights, isn't it? It's a free tool, isn't it? I can't remember. I used it a while ago.
It is.
And GIMP is image editing. You can stitch together background images. Yeah, it's also free. That one's free for sure.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, that's right. So GIMP is a bit like a free or open source version of Photoshop, for example. Not as feature rich, but I think that makes it probably easier to learn as well. So
yeah, to be honest, I used them very rarely. I mainly had Photoshop and Illustrator, so but I just remember the names and remember having used them at some point. So yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. And sorry, was it Annie that was talking about Xmind?
Yes.
So what have you used that for?
Computer screen designs interface.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So I know it's a mind mapping tool. Has it got other functions and stuff that you can use it for other things apart from creating mind maps? Or
The Xmind, I think, is pretty much about making mind maps, but it's pretty easy to just, spread around all your branching. That's what is interesting about it. It's really easy to use.
Yeah. Okay, great, thanks.
This is Alan from Puerto Rico. I have a couple tools I could mention. So another one from the similar kind of mind mapping or just idea mapping and frameworking, sketching, and wireframing. It's called Miro, M-I-R-O.
Yeah.
It's also super easy to use and can use for a whole bunch of things. You could even create your own like garden maps or whatever you'd want to do, but it's meant for like prototyping websites and apps and a bunch of other stuff. Anything you can think of, actually, it's got templates. But more direct to what we're doing here, in the past I've dabbled, but I haven't really explored too much with SketchUp, Google's free CAD building software. Yeah, there's I'm going to post a link to, because a lot of the tools we've been mentioning are in the open source or free buckets, and those are very good and handy to have instead of just having to buy all these sometimes thousands of dollars worth of apps. So I'm going to post a link with like pretty much every app you could ever think of for anything you could ever need it for. So I'll send that in a second.
Well, thank you, Alan.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Alan. Yes, so yeah, I've used Miro a fair bit, and I've used SketchUp extensively myself, and we'll be having a bit more of a look at SketchUp in a bit. Anyone else sitting there with like burning to say something about another tool they're aware of? Or
sorry, Joe, I was going to say that I've not actually used it myself, but I've been on a course where I saw the teacher use it, and then we used it in the design work. And it was so the teacher was Iranian, and he was using for the first time a drone to do the with a little camera, and so he was looking at different ways in which we could measure the land, a big landscape, and then use that information, which was captured digitally, as well as what we were doing by the more traditional methods of measuring the land. And he was the one who said there are loads and loads of other tools, which Alan from Puerto Rico has just mentioned, around apps. And for me, this was all new language that, you can walk around with a smartphone and basically just about anything that the old ways of doing smartphone, as long as you had a signal, would give you access to that. It all seemed really clever.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting, some of the things you can do with drones. I know, yeah, I knew that Aranya was working with drones, but I haven't talked to him about it at all or anything, so I don't know what kind of stuff he's been doing. So I'd be interested to find out more about the measuring land with them. And we're going to look at a little, some ways you can get some fairly like accurate enough measurements, particularly doing large scale stuff when it doesn't need to be super accurate. But yeah, I know that drones have been used for things like, they're used in the aggregates supply chain to, if you've got a massive pile of gravel, you fly a drone up and it flies around this pile and estimates the volume of it, and then from that it can work out what the weight is and therefore how much the value is in a big, massive kilometre long pile of gravel and stuff. So yeah, being used for really interesting things. And I think probably fairly heavily, sorry, what am I trying to say? A lot of the tools that I've used, and I'll probably look at in the next the first half of this session, I guess, are going to be for that kind of surveying, like information gathering. A lot of that data is already out there. It's a question of it, being in different places and you've been able to access it. So I guess my definition of digital design tools is, it's kind of computer-based programs like, your kind of Illustrator, Inkscape, maybe Xmind, SketchUp. So the tools for doing the actual design, but there's also a lot of information that's out there in various different online databases and stuff as well, that can really help you build up a picture of the thing that you're designing for. Okay. So what digital design tools have you used? So if I guess we've talked about some of these already, like Photoshop, GIMP, and Inkscape. I actually use things like PowerPoint or the Google Online version, or actually I've got a Mac now, so I use Keynote, which is like PowerPoint. I find that they're like really simple tools that are great for very quickly diagramming things, just dropping boxes onto a blank page and putting arrows and stuff between things. So it's really good. They can be really helpful for things like flowcharts or organizational diagrams and all that kind of stuff. Can't talk about digital tools without mentioning good old spreadsheets that we all, of course, we all love to bits. And some sectors I'll talk about a bit later on. Yeah, so that's some things. And I'm going to run through a few other things that I've found personally useful. So did you know that this is particularly for people based in the UK, that bing.com /maps now gives you access to, it has an ordnance survey layer. So you have access to the entire ordnance survey mapping data online. So you don't have to go and buy individual maps. It's all there. So that's great for getting things like contour data and everything else. The ordnance survey is incredibly detailed mapping for the whole of the British Isles and quite a few other places as well. So bing.com /maps is worth checking out. So this is Google Earth, which is basically made up of lots of satellite imagery, which I guess is at the same time incredibly useful and also kind of terrifying that we're all living in this essentially private sector run surveillance society, but that's a conversation for another time. But it does also mean there's all this data available. So this is an example of, this is a permaculture project in Denmark. Some friends of mine run this, Permakulturhaven, which basically means permaculture garden in Danish. And this is their little house here, which they built themselves, which is incredibly cute, straw bale, roundwood timber frame kind of construction. But then they have this field out here, which they also manage. so for this bigger scale stuff, which I guess is a similar sort of scale to what Arani's doing, I might be making an assumption there. But when you're looking at kind of field scale, your measurements don't need to be accurate down to the last millimeter. If you're measuring up to, because you're going to lay a patio or something, you know, if you're going to do some construction work, then yeah, maybe your measurements need to be correct down to the millimeter or the inch or whatever. But for this large scale, you've got a lot more tolerance of error. So actually a tool like this is probably good enough for what you're using it for. And let me just see if I can just go into Google Earth.
Sorry, Joe, just while you're doing that,
yep.
The Google Earth Pro app actually gives you a higher resolution than the web version.
Okay.
So if you use the app opposed to the web version, you get higher resolution imagery, and therefore you can actually measure smaller. I'm not saying patio, but you can use it for smaller areas like back gardens, etc.
Right, brilliant. Thanks, Pete.
Also, just on the Earth Pro thing, after Pete recommended it, I had a look and found that on my garden, I'm able to look at older satellite images where stuff hasn't grown as much. So things like boundaries were easier to see because hedges weren't as big.
Right, yeah, useful. Or you can compare how much things have grown in a given time period and so on. So this can be useful for all sorts of things. Here we're looking at, this is, you might recognize it from my last talk, which is lilac. So this is how lilac appears in Google Earth. And so you can do things like, if we scooch into 2D for a moment, get the little, on the left-hand side, we've got this little ruler. So I could measure, you know, what's the surface area of my flat, the roof over my flat, for example, and it's going to be, okay, so it's given me a measurement for what the perimeter is, but also what's the area. So 63 and a bit square meters, roughly. So that might be useful if you were doing something like you wanted to calculate what's the rainwater capture potential for this from this roof. I don't know if you've done this calculation yet on the course. It's a deafening silence.
Sorry, no, we haven't done that, Joe.
Okay. Well, apologies if I'm about to ruin something that Graham's going to teach you later on.
Is this the rainwater harvesting?
Yeah. Do you want me to go
no, yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, please do, because it's not something we've covered.
Right. So let's say, for example, you know, you want to install some water butts, and you want to know how much, how big a water butt should I install? And so the way you might want to, the way you would approach that is to say, well, how much rainwater can I capture? And so to calculate that, you need to know how much roof space you've got. So in this case, I've got just, well, let's say 63 square meters. And then you multiply that by the rainfall for your area. I happen to know that the rainfall here in Leeds is something like around about 660 millimeters. So another online digital tool, we've got a rainfall calculator. So our catchment area was 63 meters. Rainfall, what did I say, 660 millimeters. So, and you can have that calculated into liters or whatever units you want. But anyway, so on that roof in Leeds, it should capture in a year 41,580 litres. Now, you know those big IBCs, those cube, like a meter cube, they hold 1,000 litres. So I might say to myself, right, in that case, I'm going to get 4 IBCs because that's, you know, I could store 4,000 litres. Sorry, I beg your pardon, it's 41,000, isn't it, not 4,000. You might say, right, well, in that case, I need 41 IBCs to store all that. But obviously, you're going to be using it up over the time as well. And some's going to be lost to evaporation. There's a lot more detail to it. But I guess the point I'm making is there are lots of tools out there to help you do a lot of these kind of calculations really quickly and easily. So you can get like a ballpark idea of what you're working with. Right, back to my slides. So that's one thing that could be useful, that you could use Google Earth for. That weather data that I was quoting before, I was saying I know it's about 660 millimeters. One good source of weather data is it's called weatherspark.com, which I think I've also got that open somewhere. So this is the average data for Leeds. Weatherspark has recently become plastered in adverts, which makes it a bit less usable. But it's got a great source of data on here. So it gives you like a climate summary. So I'm now looking just at Leeds, where I am, and this is telling you some stuff about it. That's a bit of a summary, not that readable, that graph, but you can break it down into things like what's the average temperatures at different times of the year for where you are, what's the average cloud cover, different parts of the year for your location, average precipitation statistics. So I discovered just now that the 21st of April is statistically the driest day in Leeds. And, you know, it's things like humidity, wind, water temperature and stuff. But it also interestingly has like this growing season graph as well, which gives you all sorts of interesting statistics about when you can expect the most frost in that particular place, when the growing season is going to be in full swing, and so on. And also solar energy. So how much solar energy can you expect to be incident on a given square meter on a given day of the year? So some of these things particularly useful if you're designing for a site which maybe isn't where you live, or you don't already have a lot of good knowledge or ability to do lots of direct observations of your own. Huge amounts of data already out there which you can use to inform some of your design decisions about a given site. So yeah, that's Weatherspark. I've already shown you that. This is quite an interesting tool which I came across a few years ago. Quite a common issue in, particularly when I'm teaching permaculture courses. It's really easy to measure area and to measure things on the flat, but slope can be a more difficult thing to measure. Now, I came across this app, which is just called Clinometer, because it measures the incline, I guess. The reason I came across it was because I was planning to build a dry brick wall in my garden. It's like a retaining wall that's made out of bricks, but there's no mortar in it. So I wanted the water to be able to flow in and out of the wall. I didn't want to like over-engineer it. I didn't want to use loads of cement in it. I didn't want the hassle of laying mortar, like laying bricks in mortar, and then having to put weep holes in to drain it. So I basically just put a wall in and then just lent it back by a certain angle. And I got the inspiration for this from an allotment site in Nottingham, where they had a very similar wall, which this retaining wall is about 6 feet tall. So I was thinking, that's definitely, the wall of that angle is definitely strong enough for this allotment site. That's going to work fine for my garden, where I just need a 3 foot high wall. So I got this app, which is this Clinometer. If I stop sharing for a minute, and if you can see there. So basically it's on my phone, and as I tilt my phone, it's telling me how many degrees it's tilted by. So I basically got my phone, offered it up against this wall in Nottingham, and measured it. It was actually I think it was about 12 degrees. And then I was like, great, that's how much I need to lay my wall back by. As I was building my wall in my garden, I was able to keep checking it and making sure that it was about 12 degrees. So I was happy, that'd be fine. If you wanted to measure, you know, let's say you're in your garden and it's got a bit of a slope on it and you want to know how much, then it could be as simple as just getting a plank of wood, sticking it on a brick at the bottom of the slope and another brick at the top to get a kind of average across that slope, an average across the length of the plank, sitting your phone on it with a clinometer, and it'll just tell you what the slope is for that area. That's a really quick, simple way of doing it. And that's, it's a free app for the phone. So much easier than other ways I've done in the past of taking points throughout the whole garden and then measuring them on the level with a spirit level, and then measuring down and working out exactly what the difference is. And yeah, much easier just have a clinometer and do it that way.
Joe,
Yeah.
there's a product, I don't know whether it's on Android, but it's definitely on iOS, called Theodolite, which does something very similar. But what you can also do is it uses the camera. So you can actually photograph with an overlay all of your information. So you've got direction, you can do clinometers, you can do slopes, you can do contouring. There's a whole raft of things. It's a couple of quid. I've had it for several years, and I've used it in a whole range of applications, and it is very, very useful. So that's another one that I'd throw in there.
Brilliant. I'm just having a search for it now on the.
No, I was just going to say, Pete's brought that up, but when you were talking, I was looking online, and Theodolite came up on a Guardian article. So there's a very recent Guardian article which is looking at digital mapping aids, and Theodolite was one that was in the top 5.
Yeah. It looks like it might be quite a new on Android, because there's only 10,000 downloads of it. But yeah, 4.2 out of 5 reviews. So yeah, I might have to check it out. Thanks.
I'd like to mention one more.
Yep.
So built into iOS, there's a lot of cool functionality that most people miss just because Apple doesn't just tell everybody about what comes in there. So there's one just built in called Measure. And Measure does a couple cool things. It uses the light sensors and all these other cool things to do very accurate measurements in augmented reality of pretty much anything. If you want to measure the length of an object or the slope or anything, it's all built in. And then in that same app, you know how in the photo app you slide to go to like the camera, or you go to like the video camera. So you slide to the next page, and it's a leveling app, but it's not just a plain level of like 1 degree tilting. It's also panning. So when you're trying to balance out a table or something and see if it's fully level, it also does that. Pretty cool.
Great, that sounds amazing. Yeah, I'll have to check it out. Thanks. So yeah, I think there are all sorts of tools out there for this kind of surveying work. Obviously, permaculture is a relatively niche discipline, but surveying isn't. So there are lots of tools out there for this kind of work, and we absolutely shouldn't be afraid to go out there into the mainstream and use the tools that are available. Another useful one, and again, I'm speaking from a UK perspective, there may well be similar data available in other countries, but here in the UK, we're fortunate we've got this like soil database. So this is landis.org.uk soilscapes. And so this is basically, it's like a geological database of the whole country. And it shows you what is the kind of prevailing soil type for that area. Now, this, I have to say, there's a word of caution comes with this, which is local conditions may well vary quite a lot, but this will tell you things like about what the parent rock, what's the influence of the parent rock on the underlying soil that is in your area. So, will it have a tendency will it be likely to be clay or sand? This doesn't replace doing your own soil testing on your own site, but it gives you some information about, the broader area. So I always think this is quite an interesting little fact. I also teach on a course in Nottingham, which is, you can't quite read it, but this is Nottingham at the bottom of this map here. And you'll see that the area of soil that we've got is basically the whole area to the north of Nottingham. And we can see that down the right-hand panel, it's telling us what that soil's like. And it's saying it's very sandy. And then further down, we can see the fertility. Oops, what have I done here? We can see the fertility of the soil is very low. And if you to look at modern maps, the area that this, historic maps, the area traced by this soil profile is very close to the boundaries of the historical Sherwood Forest. And the reason it stayed a forest so much longer than all the rest of the land around it is because the soil is so poor. It's really poor agricultural soil, so there was no point trying to cut the trees down and grow crops on it. So it remained a forest, which is why, you know, Sherwood Forest lasted for so long. Quite a lot of it has, in recent years, you know, in the last 70 years since the Green Revolution, a lot of it has since been felled and turned into agricultural land, because basically we just douse the soil with artificial fertilizers. But naturally, this is poor soil, and hence it was always forest.
Joe, sorry, can I throw a couple more in?
Yeah.
For the UK people, British Geological Survey, they do 2 free apps, one for geology, which does include overlying soils, and they also do a soils app as well, specifically, which doesn't necessarily go into the detail like this one with fertility, but it does give you a very, it collocates the BGS survey material, which is usually pretty tight. I've worked for them in the past. So, you know, their survey information is generally very good. It's enough to tell you, or tell me, for instance, that within 9 meters of my house is boulder clay, and sure, it is within about 9-10 meters of my house. So the detail on there for precise location is fairly good.
Great, thanks. And one of the, just I guess that just reiterates the point that there's super useful data already out there, and all these databases are all online and freely available. The reason I was kind of just recommending a bit of caution is you're never quite sure exactly what's happened on a specific site. So, you know, so at Lilac, the soil here was quite contaminated, so the site had to be remediated, which meant the top 2 feet of soil were removed, and then they put a membrane down and then imported essentially manufactured false topsoil from outside. So our soil here isn't anything like proper lead soil. So it's always good just to check what's actually going on in your site. Take a few soil samples as well. Okay. Oops, I keep clicking on that.
Sorry, could I just add one other thing there? There's contamination. Your local council in the UK maintains a brownfield and a contamination register. So that's another useful source for confirming that you may have contaminants, as does the history of the house or the property that you have.
Have you got a link for that, Pete?
Yeah, not to hand, but I'll send it through.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah.
So what is it? It's a local authority.
Every local council should maintain a contaminant register, so that there's a recognition, obviously, of brownfield sites for construction, but they also should maintain. In party, I think it is with the Environment Agency. It was originally constructed by what was the National Rivers Authority, and it should locate every known contaminated site. So, for instance, property I have was an old blacksmith's, so it was confirmed that it was contaminated. You know, contaminants are, you know, slag and charcoal and all that. So the one caveat I would say is it is, I mean, I think the original database was formed in the 1990s. It's still not anywhere near 100% complete, but I've used it on a couple of jobs in the past, and it's been a useful reference point, you know, for particular locations.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I'd love to see that actually. I'd love to see a link for that. Okay, so we've kind of been looking at things like, you know, soil maps, weather data, that kind of stuff. But then there's like all this other stuff about plants as well. So there's this Picture This app, which basically it's an app where you take a photograph of a plant with your phone and it will identify it for you, which again, I would probably urge a little bit of caution with it, but I just installed it earlier on this afternoon and went out around the garden, took some pictures with it. And my experience was that it was accurate, but it wasn't necessarily precise in the sense that it didn't necessarily tell me the exact variety or species, but it would get the right genus. So for example, I've got like a peach, which it identified correctly as a prunus, but it didn't know, you know, it thought it might be an apricot. So would I use it on a foraging walk before sticking anything in my mouth? Probably not. If I was looking at a plant thinking, I wonder what that is, I could try it, and it would probably put me on the right lines. But I certainly wouldn't eat something based on a recommendation from it. But yeah, I was surprised at how good it was. Has anybody used a similar thing, like a plant ID app? Pete, I can see your hand up.
Yeah, I've used Picture This actually.
What was your experience?
Yeah, pretty much the same. I mean, you get some misses. I went around my parents' garden before COVID, and they had many, many exotics, according to the app, which were just clearly not exotics. Right. But it's an AI app, and it has improved. So it actually has a learning capability. So the more people that have used it, the better its capabilities have become. So I got it quite early on. And as I say, it was more miss than hit. And it was really the first one for iOS, but it has dramatically improved. And as you say, I'm not sure I would use it on a mushroom I found that I didn't recognize. But for a lot of garden stuff, it gives you ballparks at the very least.
Yeah. And something that I encounter quite often when teaching permaculture is on courses, I find there's often a mixture of people who are really keen gardeners who get drawn into permaculture because it's a kind of gardening thing that's about green living as well. And then there are people who have a similar route into permaculture to me, which is I came into it because I was really kind of like concerned about the state of the world and wanted to find a positive response to it, but I knew nothing about plants whatsoever. So I was completely naive. And I mean, there's so many plants out there, you can never know them all. But one of my real stumbling blocks was just like, how am I ever going to learn all these plants? So anything I think that can give you a bit of a leg up is worth a look. But again, I wouldn't rely on it completely. So this isn't a tool necessarily, but it's a database. pfaf.org, plantsforafuture.org, is an amazing database run by, I think it's pretty much all volunteers. And this is based on the work of a guy called Ken Fern, who was a bit of a character. He started out as a London bus driver and then ended up going off and buying a little piece of land down in Cornwall and growing all these different plants and rating them for kind of usefulness, be that edibility, medicinal, dyes, fibers, all these different kind of uses of plants. And then, so he released a book, published a book 20, 30 years ago based on this. And then since then, this is kind of the online database that started off with his work, but it's been developed a lot since and has more peer review in the process. So again, I'd say it's not entirely completely peer reviewed by botanists, but there's been a lot of direct observations by people growing these plants, seeing how they do in different environments, eating them, using them for different purposes, and then reporting back on it. So yeah, you could take your picture this app around the garden, identify some plants, and then have a look in PFAF to see what you can do with it. You know, is it edible? Can use it for medicine? Can use it as a dye plant or whatever. So yeah, really strongly recommend PFAF.
Joe, can I ask a quick question there? Because you in effect, you've raised the point. So, because some might say it was semantic, but within permaculture, when we use particular words to mean particular things like tools, so in this case, we're talking about digital tools, but then you said, technically this is a database, but it's a digital database. So in terms of design tools, would you say any resource that we access to help better understand what it is we're trying to resolve would fall into this category of being a design tool? Because if that was the case, it's an enormously broad area.
Um,
Because you said Ken started with a book, and then the book became a website, and now it's, you know, it's just, it goes like Topsy, as you say.
yeah. I mean, the honest answer, Alan, is I don't know. What it's not particularly well defined. You know, what is a tool, what isn't a tool, what's digital, what isn't. I guess I don't have it really clear in my head what it is, but I guess I'm just kind of trying to collect a lot of useful resources that can help you with your designs, and most of which are either online or digital. Oh, I'm a little bit conscious of time. We talked about mind maps earlier on. Someone was talking about XMind. MindMup is another one. I haven't used it, but one of my diploma apprentices recommended it to me recently. Okay, so now we're getting into the actual designing tools, like some of the drafting and drawing tools. I don't know what the difference between drafting and drawing is, but there you go. So if you're really serious, then AutoCAD is kind of the industry standard in things like architecture and engineering. It's been around forever, but it's also quite expensive and it's extremely feature rich, so it can be quite a challenge to learn. And I think within AutoCAD there is a whole 3D bit to it, which I can't remember what it's called. But there are lots of more accessible alternatives. So here we've got SketchUp, which has been mentioned already. There's real-time landscaping, which looks very nice and pretty. I think it has lots of plants and stuff already in its database that you can just drag and drop into your models. So SketchUp is, it's by a company called Trimble, and there is a relationship with Google there. I'm not sure if Google owns Trimble or what, but you can basically, there's a free version you can use in your browser online, and I'll show you that in a second. There's then Blender, which is a completely open source 3D modeling piece of software. That tends to be used a lot in animation and stuff. Really, really powerful, totally free. But again, it's not quite as easy and accessible to use as SketchUp is. Flowscape, I can't remember anything about that. If you do get into this stuff, I'll show you some SketchUp in a second. If you do get into this stuff, there's a Facebook group, if you're on Facebook, called Computer Aided Permaculture Design. So that's people using things like SketchUp and so on, and various other tools. And there you go. It's telling me that I should invite Alan Charlton to join this group. So maybe I will. And oh, I did do a little tutorial on how to do a sun sector analysis. If you're gonna use SketchUp for a site where you can't do your own, like maybe you can't sit and do your own like protracted observation of the site, I sort of talk through how you can set up a model in SketchUp to do a sun sector analysis, to work out where the shadows are going to be on a site at different times of year. It's a little bit out of date now because I'm using an old version of SketchUp, but the principles remain the same. So if you go onto YouTube and search SketchUp for Permies, you'll find that. Okay, so SketchUp, it lives over here. Basically, it lives on, I think it's sketchup.com. I'm just going to go home here for a second and really quickly bosh out a model for you. So I'm going to create a new model. I'm going to have it in millimeters because that's what I'm more comfortable in. It hopefully is going to wake up in a second. Might be going a little bit slow. There we are. Okay. So this is what a kind of completely new project looks like in SketchUp, and there's some things to note here. So straight off the bat, we're working in 3D. So we're looking at this in a kind of we're looking at it from a diagonal, if you like. I mean, I think technically it might be called isometric projection or something like that. Alan might be able to tell me if I've got that right or not. I think your history as a design teacher.
Isometric.
Isometric, thank you. It's isometric and axonometric, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm conflating the two words. So isometric, we're looking at it sort of down from an angle. You'll notice that we've got these three different colored lines. So we've got this blue line, which is basically the vertical axis. Then I'm just going to spin around a little bit. Then we've got this kind of green line, which is front to back, and then this red line, which is left to right. So that helps you to kind of orientate how you're looking at your model. We can do things like locating it in the world, so we can decide where this thing's going to be, so we can add a location. And that's basically now going to pull up a lot of Google Earth map data. So I think Graham's local is somewhere in this map, but I'm not entirely sure where it is. Graham, whereabouts is this? Whereabouts is the station pub on here?
Where are we?
So
The railway pub.
Railway, that's it, yeah.
In Clifftown Road, so that you can see the railway line there.
Clifftown Road.
Go back the other way.
Yeah.
I think you might have gone too far. So it's quite small. Yeah, you've gone too far. So, well, I don't know if you can see Scratton Road. There you go, Clifftown Road. You're practically on it where your little cursor is.
So what we can do is say, right, let's do Graham's local on in SketchUp. So we can select this region. That's going to do is going to say, right, is this the bit you want to import? Yes. I'm going to import that data, and it's going to plonk it into my model. It is running a little bit slow. I think it's because I'm also sharing my screen as well. Slow my map down a little bit. So now our model is this bit of Southend-on-Sea, or is it Westcliff? I'm not quite sure. Graham.
This is Southend-on-Sea. You need to be slightly over to the west.
Oh, a bit late for that.
Yeah, don't worry. It'll do for your.
Yeah. So this is basically the map data, and it's showing. You can see on here where the buildings are and stuff. I guess we could go on to Google Maps and look for Clifftown Road, so I can have a look at what the buildings look like. And I'm going to do a street map thing. So I'm going to go and stand in Clifftown Road here. Okay, so does this look about right, Graham?
Yep, that's it. You're
Right
almost there. In fact, you can see the pub sign. Go along slightly. Keep going. Keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going. There you go. You can see the railway. There it is.
Right, there it is. So there's the pub.
Fairly recent picture as well, with the sign saying pub, just in case you didn't know what it was. But
so I think actually you're probably right. We're probably off down here somewhere, aren't we?
Yeah, you're a little bit along, but close enough for your purposes. Yes.
Let's say this is the pub's about here. So I'm going to create a pub in the model. So on the left-hand side over here, I've got these various different tools. So I've got things like a little bucket and a pencil and some shapes and stuff like that. So I'm going to go at the shape thing. Can you see what I'm doing, everyone?
Yeah.
Cool. So I'm just going to plonk a shape down on here, and let's say that's going to be accurate enough. That's created a rectangle. You've then got this pull and push tool here. Incidentally, whilst I'm doing all this, you can switch on what's called the instructor, and that's telling you what, when you click on something, like if I click the measuring tool, it's going to give me help on here to explain how to use it. But I want the push-pull tool, so I've got the push-pull tool. I want to click on here. So now clicking on that square that I've just drawn, and I'm going to pull it up to create a 3D object. So this is now, we're now creating the railway pub. I'm going to go over here to my little, these are like my navigation tools, and I'm going to spin round and have a look at the pub here. Oh, it's a bit further away from the road than I think it is. So let's pull it again, pull the front out a little bit like that. I'm going to assume it's actually got a pitched roof on it. So what I'm going to do to do that is I want to create like some diagonal surfaces. The way I'm going to do that is use what are called in technical drawing construction lines. So I'm going to go from my end point. I want to find my midpoint along this wall. So it's there. So that's the middle. And then I'm going to create what's called a construction line, which is just a line that I'm using to find a point to then draw from. I'm going to say I want the eaves of this, or I want the gable end of the eaves of the gable end to rise by 10 meters. So I can either pull it up to about 10 meters, or if you look in the very bottom right hand corner of the window, you can see where it says length. At the moment it's saying 11,156 millimeters. I can just type 10,000 and that will be in millimeters, because when I created the model, it said it's going to do it all in millimeters. I can hit return, and that's basically made that line 10 meters long. Now, I want the apex of my roof to be straight with the rest of the building, right? So I'm going to just say the apex is going to come along here. And SketchUp is kind of intelligent enough to start trying to, what's the word? To snap to the existing model. What I'm going to do is going to go along here again, find my midpoint, and then go up again. And you'll see that it's snapped to 10 meters because it's kind of recognized that I've got another line over here that's 10 meters long. Is that making sense? Or am I waffling?
No, I'm thinking in terms of people who have smartphones and tell me about this predictive text. So in a drawing sense, the snapping is a predictive. It's saying the logical place to have this endpoint would be, and it snaps to that point. It makes total sense.
That's a great analogy. Thanks, Alan. And then
there's a little animation about it on the right side. You can see.
So snap all these, and as I do so, once it recognizes I've got a full, in this case, a triangle, it's also creating a plane in there as well. So when I draw this line from that apex down here, it will create a plane on the top and on the gable end. So now I've got something approaching what is starting to look like a building. We can make it look a bit more fancy by doing things like materials. So in here, we've got this list of all these materials that come already included in SketchUp. Let's go for this nice brick kind of thing. How do I select that? Oh no, that's not what I want, because it looks like I've currently got Helen boots. I think Helen is, this is Helen, who's the little person who's already in the model when you start off. That gives you a sense of scale. Looking at Helen and looking at the pub, I think my pub is looking enormous. Not to worry. So what I'm actually trying to do is make my pub look like it's made out of brick, and I'm failing miserably. How do I get me? Here we are, brick. So I can search for some materials in here. Brick, cladding and siding. There's my bricks. Okay, that's now selected. So I've now got some brick walls. I can say, well, let's have some roofing. There we go. What kind of tiles should we have? No, they look nice. So you can start to kind of make your model look a little bit more realistic by applying some materials. And if you want to, you can change how this is viewed. So you can remove all these sort of edges and lines and stuff, so it looks a bit more natural. Other things that are really useful in here, you've got what's called the 3D warehouse, which is this is basically a massive database of content that's been created by other users. So other people have used SketchUp to create all these models, and then they've shared them in this database, so you can then use them. So let's say we want to put a tree in the street. Let's just say a birch tree. There we go. Here are some birches. Let's use that one. It looks all right. Yep, I'm happy with that. Download it. And when that's downloaded, it'll allow me to kind of, there it is. So I can move it around. If I want to, I can move it using this move tool, or I can resize it as well. Hang on, I haven't quite got hold of that. I can resize it by picking one of these corners and just dragging it like so, or I can move it just in one dimension or another, or however you want to do it really. Just on the shadows thing that I said, I've done that, I have done the tutorial for it, but I'll just quickly show you. You've got this thing on the right hand side. This is the display tool. Shadows are currently off in this model, but I want to switch them on. And as you can see, that's the shadows have suddenly appeared in the model. But also you've got these time and date sliders here. So we can say, well, the dates, so today is, what is it? Today's the 2nd of June. So let's say 2nd of June. And we can say, well, what the shadow's going to do on the 2nd of June. So at 7 in the morning, the sun is just rising in the east. It's coming over here. As the day progresses, the sun moves around and the shadows are cast to the north of the building, as you would expect, and so on as the sun moves around. So I found that really useful when I've been working for a client where I've been trying to do a design for their garden, but I didn't have regular access to just go and sit in the garden and sort of observe the shadows and stuff. I could use this to model their building and then kind of make some informed assumptions about where the shadow is going to be. Anyway, that's a super quick look at SketchUp. I haven't really got time to show you much more. I find with SketchUp, in my experience, it wasn't super intuitive when I first started using it. I'm fairly comfortable with most software, but I definitely needed to watch a few tutorials on YouTube. Fortunately, there are thousands. There are loads and loads of people out there, some amazing YouTube channels with loads of, you know, great tutorials on how to use SketchUp. And that was how I actually, yeah, became a bit more proficient. And then ultimately, in the end, I was able to use it to produce things like in the very first slide that I showed you. So just share my screen again. So this image here is one that I produced. This is completely made in SketchUp. It's not, none of this is real at all. This is for, I think, my final design in my diploma portfolio. So all these models here, you'll notice that these 3 trees, for example, are actually kind of similar shape, but just slightly different proportions. That's because they're just models that I downloaded from the 3D warehouse. Same with these 2. I think they might be that same birch I was just showing you. And this willow, same thing. But you can, when you get really into SketchUp, you can start using what's called rendering plugins, where it effectively takes those 3D models and then simulates light falling on them from an artificial light source that you can model, and then it sort of creates a almost photorealistic image from your 3D model. So that's some of the stuff that you can achieve with it. Yeah. Any questions? I'm going to stop talking.
Hi, Joe. This is Thomas. Thanks for that talk. SketchUp, would you say, maybe it's just a result of the example you gave with what you were doing, but would you say it's primarily useful for urban design, or is it just as useful for, say, planning a sizable garden? Or would you instead go for like that landscaping pro thing you talked about earlier?
I think you definitely can use it on a much bigger landscape scale. I've seen a YouTube tutorial about how to import contour data into it. So you can create your model, then import contour data into it, and effectively kind of drape your landscape layer onto it. So you then get all that height data, which tends to get much more important at a large scale. You know, if you're working with like farms or, you know, any sizable piece of land, then height is going to start getting really important. I honestly haven't used the other tool enough to be able to tell you that you should use that one or not. But there are ways of using SketchUp for more landscape scale stuff.
So if I was like wanting to put an apple guild into my design, for example, that's something SketchUp can handle.
Yeah, it might not have, depending on which plants you want to use, there might not be examples of that in the 3D warehouse. You might have to create your own. I think maybe you're probably going to be finding the limits of its usefulness for permaculture design if you're kind of thinking about planting like schemes where you, I think its usefulness really is like, yeah, definitely is designed for like buildings and furniture and industrial design, that kind of stuff. It's kind of good for visualizing how things might look over time. So if you wanted to do like, here's just a kind of rough idea of what this garden looks like now, what it might look like in 5 years when the trees are a bit bigger, and then what it might look like in 15 years when all the trees are, you know, I don't know, well, not reaching mature height after 15 years, but you could quickly kind of iterate on a design to have a sense of what it might look like over time.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, can I make a sort of comment on that? I mean, I would say these sort of tools, having used similar tools for other survey work, they're very good at rendering how something looks in general terms in 3 dimensions, as we would see it, say, standing in the back garden. But I think it's, you know, where you're doing plant plots, you know, plotting plants out, trees, etc. You know, a 2-dimensional view, I think, is far more informative, because you can actually, you know, you're going to put your textual content around it, etc. You know, and that's where I think maybe a combination of these tools, because I've used Illustrator and other vector analysis tools before, and they're very good because you can resize, you can make standard shapes or your own sort of shapes as well. So I think it's not that one tool fits everything. It's using a combination of these tools to illustrate your point in the same way as you would have, you know, a handwritten base map, and then maybe sector analysis, and maybe you might then have your planting diagram. So I think it's taking the best tool for the job that you need to apply it to, and seeing how it comes out.
Absolutely, and that's a truism in all of life. You know, and I think, you know, SketchUp it's a fair investment to learn it, and I think it's good for that. You know, for doing, it's the kind of like doing these architectural rendering type things. You know, to give a vision of what something's going to look like. If you're just going to if you're just trying to decide what plants to put in your allotment, it's complete overkill. If you're involved in a community group where you're trying to get some funding for a community project and you need to engage some stakeholders and make it look a bit professional, then maybe it's more useful in that kind of context. But yeah, I mean, I used it to design the terracing in my back garden, and it really was, yeah, totally over the top for that task. Basically, I'm building a few low brick walls. I didn't need to do a full 3D design in SketchUp for that purpose. I enjoyed doing it, but you know, that's by the by, really. So yeah, absolutely use the right tool for the job. I guess that's part of what learning is about, though, isn't it? It's learning which tool is the right tool for which job. And yeah.
Joe, I've just put a quick link into Rachel Bailey, who did her permaculture design course a few years ago, based up in Scotland. So she was really interested in doing the Royal Horticultural Society course, allying it with learning to become a landscape gardener, and how you brought the two together, and then what was the appropriate level of detail required to convince a paying customer that you knew what you were talking about. So I made a link to her website. I think Hedwig Murray is another female who did permaculture a few years ago, who kind of professionalized using the digital design tools. So I haven't put Hedwig's link up there, but that's just two awesome permaculture designing women that I'm aware of. I'm sure there'll be many others.
Rachel's site looks beautiful. It's got some really nice images on it.
She's award-winning now. She's winning prizes all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah, one of my I've got an apprentice over in Berlin, and his job, he's like a freelance 3D animator. He does all these kind of like animations for money, basically. And yeah, some of the graphics he's producing are just absolutely amazing. You know, just yeah. But is it appropriate for what you're doing? You know, if actually you need to get some veg grown, then don't spend 5 weeks making a beautiful model of it. You just get some seeds in the ground, you know. So it definitely is, you know, what's the right thing for the right job. Yeah. Graham, I don't know how much time we were meant to have tonight. I know I'm really blowing my time budget. Was it an hour or?
Yeah, we had an hour scheduled, so I guess we'll be sort of wrapping up soon. People need to go off.
Does anyone have burning questions? I'll take that as a no.
Can I ask a leading question? Just that I might have hinted to a few people, not tonight, in terms of how you came in and out of permaculture design. So what I'm curious to kind of ask you this leading question in terms of, has doing permaculture design and access to a whole range of ethics and principles, given that you had a sort of technological background anyway, and you've gone sort of back into a technological field, have all of those things given you a clearer sense of purpose, where you see that whilst the digital tools are still available and they're the most efficient tools, then how you spread that word so that more people can access how we do this stuff? You know, like your events management work, for example.
I don't know. I think I'm still working that out, to be honest, Alan. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think that's a live question for me that I'm still meditating on and pondering, to be honest.
And the reason I'd asked that is that we're at the stage where we've done 10 sessions with Graham and in his formal teaching on the course, and we're now all contemplating where we are with doing the final design project. And I know from the conversation we've had, a number of people are looking at a kind of livelihoods or right livelihoods, or how you move from where you are, and you use permaculture to move to that. And I know clearly you're one of many people I know who's done that. And it's just, I was just trying to tap into that. But if you're still thinking about it, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I reached a point where I was deriving all of my income through doing permaculture related activities. So I was 100%, arguably 100% right livelihood, you know, permaculture income. But it's still, a lot of it was actually, you know, it was derived from big funding pots from, you know, the European Union, or from, you know, grant giving bodies who actually get all their money from investing in oil companies and stuff. It's very difficult in our current system to be completely ethical in everything you do, even if ostensibly on the surface everything you're doing is called permaculture. So yeah, there are no easy answers to any of this, and I think we all end up with sitting on the horns of our own little dilemmas as we go through life, and trying to resolve it as best as we can with the ethics as a guiding principle. And one of the things I love about permaculture is my favorite little saying about it is, it's a set of tools, not a set of rules. So it equips us with the tools to make our own decisions about what we're comfortable with. I'm using the ethics as a guide. It's not saying you can't do this and you have to do that. You know, it credits you with the intelligence to make up your own mind. Anyway, I've talked more than enough, I think, so I'll stop.
Okay, well, thanks, Joe. Thanks for your time again, and always a good session, and
Thanks for-
always really enjoy it. But I think we better kind of wrap up now because people want to kind of have their dinner and think. Well, I do anyway. Their dinner and things like that. So I'll say goodbye. And tomorrow we've got Mandy Barber of Incredible Vegetables, who's going to be talking about perennial vegetables and things like that. So hope to see at least some of you tomorrow. So take care.
Thank
Bye
you,
for
Joe.
now.
Everyone,
Take care.
bye.
Bye for now.